Grace Whitaker was no hero, just a weary single mother trying to hold her little world together by the edge of a quiet Oregon lake. 6 years after losing her husband in a tragic aircraft explosion, she'd built a fragile peace from grief, faith, and her daughter's laughter. But one spring morning, the sky itself shattered. A private jet fell from the clouds, screaming into the water before her eyes. Fear gripped her chest as she dove beneath the burning surface, fighting the same lake that had once taken everything from her. When she pulled the unconscious man free, she thought she was saving a stranger. She didn't know he was Alexander Hale, the billionaire CEO whose company had caused her husband's death. What began as terror turned into revelation, then into a reckoning that would shake both their worlds. Yet in the ashes of fear and guilt, something unexpected bloomed. Truth, forgiveness, and the quiet, breathtaking possibility of hope. Because sometimes the miracle isn't surviving the storm. It's learning to love again once it's over. The Oregon morning had the hush of a cathedral. Lost Lantern Lake lay still as glass, pressing a perfect reflection of pine and sky into itself. Grace Whitaker, 37, soft-bodied and steady-handed, the kind of woman strangers called dear without meaning to, sat at the edge of the dock with her daughter's purple tackle box between her feet. On paper, she was a millionaire, founder of a meal delivery startup she'd sold for a sum she never said aloud. In practice, she still clipped coupons, quilted on Thursdays, and lived in a cedar-sided house she'd restored by hand. Wealth had not returned the person it came too late to save. "Mom!" Ellie, 9 years old and gap-toothed, lay on her belly studying minnows skating the shallows. "Do fish have eyelids?" "Only the lucky ones," Grace murmured, and smiled because that's what you do for a child who still believes the world answers fair questions with fair things. Then the sky screamed. It wasn't thunder. It was metal, hurt, and furious. A private jet knifed across the blue at a wrong angle, smoke jetting from the starboard engine. Grace's body moved before her mind did. She shoved Ellie behind the tackle box and scanned the lake for the line the falling would draw. The jet hit 200 yards out, the sound a single split-second crack. Water exploded, shrapnel glittered, silence snapped back, thin as ice. Fear hit her in the old place. Not just fear, the kind that finds the door inside you you've kept bolted for years. She saw everything at once. The capsule of the fuselage beginning to tip, the sun flaring on a window, the small luck of the wind. A man, no, just the impression of shoulders, struggled in the cockpit as water sloshed up. "Ellie, go!" Grace's voice tore. "Get the orange bag from the hall closet and wait by the big rock. If you see me wave, call 911. If I don't wave, call anyway." The plan was etched into Ellie's bones from fire drills Grace had practiced for storms and for grief. Grace kicked off her boots, ripped out the braid that snagged her life jacket strap, and dove. The first shock was the cold. The second was the memory. She had been here in this same lake the day Ben's heart let go in the shallows, the paramedics saying words that grated like stones. She tasted that day in the diesel-sour water and swam anyway, because fear is only a map. It is not the destination. The fuselage listed, groaning. Grace ducked under a slick of fuel, fought the weight of her clothes, and reached for the cockpit window. Inside, a man in a torn suit, blood ribboning from his temple, hands fumbling a jammed latch. He lifted his face. Their eyes locked, gray meeting brown, and for a breath she saw a life's worth of calculation in his expression switch over to something plain. "Please." She braced her feet on a seam, dug her fingers under the warped frame, and pulled. Nothing. She pulled again, not with strength, but with everything that had carried her through night feeds alone and boardrooms full of men who called her ambitious, like it was a diagnosis. The latch gave. The window yawned. Water lunged in. She grabbed his lapel and hauled. He kicked free, gasped, coughed water and a word, Alex, like an apology. They broke the surface into a world that had decided to keep breathing. Ellie was a small figure on the rocks, phone clutched white knuckle waiting for the wave. Grace kicked, towing him toward the line of sun where shallow met safe. Hold on, she panted. I've got you. He did as he was told. On the beach, he rolled to his side, retching lake water. He looked up at her, stunned and absolutely present. He had the kind of face magazines would call distinguished, and a voice hoarse with shock. I'm Alexander Hale, he said, as if it might matter. Aurelian Arrow. Somewhere down the county road, sirens started small and grew. Grace rose on shaking legs, lifted her arm high, and waved. Ellie leapt into motion. Fear drained, slow as a tide, leaving behind the ache it always left, the room inside her where Ben still didn't answer. Okay, Grace whispered to the air, to the water, to the man whose life now touched hers. Okay. By the next morning, the lake looked deceptively peaceful, as if the sky had never broken. Grace stood by the kitchen window, sunlight slanting through lace curtains her late husband had loved, the scent of percolating coffee thick in the air. Ellie was still asleep in the loft. The local news murmured from a small TV on the counter, footage of divers, flashing lights, and words like miraculous rescue. Grace turned the volume down before they said the man's name. She didn't need to know more. Heroes, she'd learned, didn't get thank yous. They got complicated. She carried her coffee to the porch. The boards creaked in the same rhythm as her heart, slow, unsure, burdened by the strange weight of yesterday. She stared at the lake until the reflection blurred. A woman had once looked back at her from that water, young, fierce, married, certain that love could hold off tragedy. Now it showed someone softer, heavier, stitched together by loss and habit. The crunch of tires broke her thoughts. Grace's head lifted. 3 black SUVs, Cadillacs, polished and foreign to the valley, rolled to a stop in front of her house. For a heartbeat, her stomach dropped. Men in suits stepped out, followed by a woman in a charcoal gray blazer and sunglasses. Grace's fingers tightened around her mug. The woman removed her glasses. A faint bruise colored her temple. Her hair pulled tight. Her expression alert but tired. Alexander Hale. The man she'd pulled from the lake. He climbed the porch steps slowly, his movements precise, careful. Mrs. Whitaker? Grace nodded. It's Grace. He hesitated, then offered a small smile. Grace, I wanted to thank you properly. He gestured behind him. One of the assistants held out an envelope and a sleek pen. A donation and some formal paperwork. Non-disclosure agreements, standard corporate procedure. I know it's intrusive, but... Grace didn't take it. Her pulse thudded in her throat. You can keep your envelope and your papers. I don't sign things I don't understand anymore. He blinked, taken aback. You're angry. I'm tired, she said quietly. And I've learned that sometimes gratitude has strings. Alex studied her for a long moment. Most people would take the money. Most people don't know what it costs. Something flickered in his expression, a trace of respect, maybe guilt. He followed her gaze into the living room, where framed photos of Ben still hung beside Ellie's crayon drawings. "You've had loss," he said softly. Grace's voice barely held. "We all have." A long silence stretched between them, the kind that feels heavier than sound. Then Ellie's laughter floated down from upstairs, a high, clear reminder that not everything in the world was broken. Alex set the envelope on the railing. "If you ever need anything, call me. You saved my life." She didn't answer, and when his convoy pulled away, the quiet that returned didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. That evening, her phone lit up with notifications. A shaky video had surfaced online. The crash, the rescue, the tiny figure in the water, comment threads filled with suspicion. Was it staged? Who is she? By nightfall, her inbox overflowed with reporters' requests. Grace turned off her phone, unplugged the router, and sat on the couch holding her daughter's blanket. The fear she'd buried for 6 years crawled back up her spine. The fear that doing the right thing still ended in punishment. She wept quietly, the sound swallowed by the hum of rain on the roof. The storm had barely cleared when headlights swept across her driveway again. Grace stepped outside, ready to send away whoever it was, but it wasn't the press this time. It was Alex, alone, his expression grave. "Grace," he said, breath clouding in the cool air. "I know what's happening online. I can help." She folded her arms. "Why should I trust you?" He exhaled. "Because the same company being accused of lying about this, my company, lied to you once too." Grace froze. "What are you talking about?" "I read the old internal reports from before the crash," he said. "The jet's hydraulic system failed because of a flaw your late husband flagged 6 years ago when he worked for Hale Aerospace. His name was Benjamin Whitaker, wasn't it?" Her breath hitched. "You knew Ben." "I didn't," Alex said, "but I should have. He was an engineer on our prototype line. His warnings were buried by my predecessor, by my uncle. I found his emails this morning." Grace's knees went weak. "He died in that explosion." "I know." His voice broke on the words. "We called it a test malfunction. We paid for silence, and yesterday the same flaw almost killed me." She stared at him, every nerve firing between rage and disbelief. The man she'd saved was tied to the man whose company had stolen her husband. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because you deserve the truth, and because I need your help to expose it." Grace laughed once, a hard, disbelieving sound. "You think I'm the person who can fix what your family destroyed?" "You're the only one who already has," he said simply. "You pulled me out of the lake when everyone else would have frozen. I can't undo what happened to Ben, but I can make sure it never happens again." The door creaked open behind her. Ellie's small voice carried out, "Mom, are you okay?" Grace turned, wiped her eyes, and forced a smile. "Yeah, baby, just cold." When she looked back, Alex held out a small USB drive. "Inside is everything. Emails, signatures, evidence. I can't go public without you. You were the witness to what this company's negligence did. I'm asking for your courage one more time." She stared at the drive, trembling. Then she reached out and took it. "Be careful," she whispered. "The truth has a way of drowning people." Alex met her eyes. "Then we'll swim together." Somewhere beyond the pines, thunder rolled again. But this time, Grace didn't flinch. The Seattle skyline shimmered under low gray clouds, every glass tower catching the wet light like confession. Grace had never been in a boardroom so tall that her ears popped on the elevator ride up. Now she sat beside Alexander Hale at a long, glistening table surrounded by men and women in dark suits. Attorneys, engineers, investors. Every one of them looked carved from the same block of stone. Immaculate, expensive, afraid. Alex stood at the head of the table, a slim folder under his arm. The company's logo, Hale Aerospace, glistened behind him on the wall, silver and cold. His uncle, Richard Hale, occupied the center seat, white-haired and still radiating command. Richard's voice was smooth. "We all know why we're here. A tragic accident, a heroic rescue, and now, a potential PR nightmare." Grace's stomach twisted. They call it PR, not truth, not justice. Alex opened the folder, slid a USB drive across the table, and met every gaze in the room. "This isn't about publicity. It's about accountability." The projector blinked alive, filling the wall with emails, Ben Whitaker's emails, each one polite, urgent, and ignored. Grace stared as her husband's words lit up the room, line by line, his handwriting visible in scanned notes she hadn't seen since the funeral. System fails under pressure. Immediate redesign recommended. Unsafe for human testing. Richard's jaw tightened. "Where did you get those?" "They were in the archive," Alex replied, "along with your approval to suppress the recall." Whispers rippled. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Grace watched Richard's face drain of color, saw the practiced arrogance falter for the first time. "This is absurd," he snapped. "Those tests were incomplete." "They were complete enough to kill my husband," Grace interrupted. The words leapt from her before she could stop them. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "You buried his warnings because the fix cost too much. You built empires on his silence." The room froze. Even Alex looked stunned at her courage. Richard slammed his palm on the table. "Do you have any idea what this will do to the company? To the thousands of employees who depend on us?" Grace stood. "Maybe it'll teach them what real safety means. Maybe it'll keep another wife from burying her future." Alex's voice cut through the charged air. "You once told me that business is about calculated risk. Well, this is mine. I'm going public with everything." Richard's face turned red. "You'll destroy us." Alex looked at Grace, then back at the room. "No, Uncle. You destroyed yourself the day you chose profit over people." The silence that followed was deep enough to hear the rain against the glass. One by one. The board members began gathering their things, some avoiding eye contact, some shaking their heads in quiet shame. Grace sat back down, her hands shaking, not from fear now, but release. When the meeting ended, Alex handed her a folder. Inside was a signed statement naming her as witness and partner in the independent investigation. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "You'll lose everything." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll finally own something worth keeping." They left the tower together, stepping into the drizzle. Paparazzi lights flared like lightning. Grace lifted her chin, no longer hiding. The truth had already begun to rise. 1 year later, the world looked different, not fixed, but trying. The old Hale Aerospace Tower had been gutted and reborn as the Whitaker Hale Foundation for Safety and Ethics in Engineering. Its new walls were made of reclaimed cedar and glass that let sunlight pour through. Inside, hundreds of people gathered for the opening ceremony. Engineers, families of crash victims, students, journalists. Grace stood off stage, wearing a simple navy dress that fit her like peace. Ellie clutched her hand, bouncing with excitement. "Mom, look! They printed Daddy's name on the wall!" Grace smiled. The bronze letters gleamed beneath the words, "Innovation with Integrity." For the first time in years, saying Ben's name didn't shatter her. It steadied her. On stage, Alex adjusted the microphone. His hair was longer now, his voice gentler. A year ago, I nearly lost my life because our company hid the truth. A woman I'd never met saved me, then showed me what courage looks like. Today, we honor her husband, Benjamin Whitaker, and every voice that was silenced by greed. From now on, safety won't be a cost. It'll be our cornerstone. Applause filled the hall, echoing off the glass. Cameras flashed, but Grace barely noticed. Her eyes met Alex's as he stepped off the stage and joined her. "He'd be proud of you," he said quietly. She shook her head, tears shining. "Of us. You made this possible." Alex smiled. "You gave it meaning." That evening, back at Lost Lantern Lake, the three of them, Grace, Alex, and Ellie, stood at the dock where everything had begun. The sunset scattered gold across the water. Ellie launched the small model plane she'd built with Alex's help. It glided smooth and true, its reflection dancing beside it. Grace exhaled, long and trembling. "I used to think saving someone meant pulling them out of danger," she said. "But maybe it's also about helping them live right after." Alex looked at her, the fading light catching warmth in his eyes. "You saved more than my life, Grace. You saved who I could have been." She smiled, soft and certain. "Then we're even." "Not even close," he whispered. Ellie laughed from the dock as the plane touched down on the still water. Grace wrapped an arm around her daughter, the other around Alex. Above them, the clouds parted, spilling sunlight like forgiveness across the lake. The past was still there, but it no longer defined them. The water was calm, the air alive, and somewhere inside her chest, Grace finally felt the quiet kind of joy that doesn't ask permission.